Welcome to the Bridge the Gap podcast. Here's your host, Dustin Udke.
Welcome in, everybody, to episode 4 of Bridge the Gap. We got an exciting episode. We're going to be talking all things defensive tonight, and I've got a great guest, the one, the only, Bob Miller from Dynasty Pros. You know, we're both the Dynasty Pros guys. Bob, how's it going tonight?
Man, it's going okay. I dig that little swanky intro you've got there, man.
Man, I had a buddy of mine cook that up. The kid Lavender, a friend of mine named Kevin, cooked that up for me, so it was pretty hopping. I enjoy it too.
That's like some baby making music right there. That's real smooth.
I gave him a couple tracks to go over, kind of some sample tracks, and him and his buddy picked it up out in LA. So it's exactly what I was looking for. So, Bob, you are an IDP guy, but before we get in there, tell everybody where they can find you and what you got coming up in terms of work and everything you're doing out there.
Oh, wow. Well, first of all, you can find me right on dynastyprosfootball.com.
Yep.
We've had that. We've been rocking and rolling for about 5 years now. You can find me on Twitter /X / whatever else it's going to be called at Dynasty Bob FF. But yeah, I've got a lot of exciting stuff coming up. We'll talk about it a little bit in this episode, but yeah, real excited about it.
Yeah, and you can always find our guest and our links at the YouTuber at the scroll at the bottom, all shows. So Bob at Dynasty Pros Bob FF and Dynasty Pros at Dynasty Pros FF, and you can follow Bridge the Gap podcast at BTG_pod FF. So Bob, I don't know if you know this, but we start every show off with a little game.
What exactly is the game?
Well, it is not a quiz or a trivia contest, nor is it a test of brute strength or athleticism. At its core, it's just a children's game, and I would wager that some of you here this evening have played Would You Rather?
So I got a Would You Rather for you, Bob. Now, for those who don't know, and maybe they can see it behind you, you are a Ravens diehard fan.
Yes, I am.
The Would You Rather I have for you tonight is, would you rather be on, now you're going to be on a, let's say, 8-hour flight. Would you rather be in the middle seat between Ray Lewis and Ed Reed? So two, big dudes, but obviously Ravens, but you're in the middle seat for 8 hours. Or would you rather be on an 8-hour flight full of Steelers fans coming off a Super Bowl win? Which would you rather have?
Ooh, that's a close one. It's a toughie. I think I'll go with the Ray Lewis, Ed Reed sandwich there.
So you'd rather be physically uncomfortable than maybe mentally uncomfortable. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
I agree with you. Now, as a Bills fan, if I was on a Dolphins flight with all Dolphins fans, that would just drive me nuts. I don't think any kind of music or anything to try to put me to sleep would work, and they would just be loud and obnoxious. Plus, sitting next to two legends would be great, especially on the defensive side of the ball, which is what the Ravens are known for. So you're talking about two Hall of Famers on the defensive side. Let's talk IDP. So if you're watching, you don't know what IDP is, individual defensive players. It's a format of league. Yep, IDP. It's come into kind of popularity the past maybe 5 years. You're one of the stakeholders in the space. You were just in the Kings Classic IDP division at the Fantasy Football Expo this past week. So tell us a little about what IDP is and why you enjoy it.
Oh, wow. Well, we got to keep this show under, 5 hours, but no, IDP is, it's obviously you're playing with, individual defensive players. So, probably, I'm not going to, I've been playing fantasy football since I was in high school. I am, in my late 40s. So I've been playing for quite a long time, for, over 30 years. In fact, it wasn't even called fantasy football back then. But regardless, I've been playing in home leagues forever. And I just wanted to change things up and come up with a different way, just something to spice things up a little bit. And back in 2010, I started a new home league here in Tennessee. And, from the get-go, it was an auction draft. It always was auction, keeper league, and we used defensive players. And we would count tackles, of course, and sacks and interceptions and things like that because, I mean, let's face it, it's equally as exciting to watch, but it just added a new element to the actual fantasy football game that we were playing, and I just wanted to see how that would go. It wasn't really a big deal at the time. um no one that I was aware of was really messing around with it at that point. And then enter Gary Davenport. I started following him years and years and years ago. But yeah, I just did it I just got bored. I mean, to be honest with you, it was just the same old every year. What defense are you going to take? What kicker you're going to take? And, it's no different from any of these leagues that try to make changes by, I remember when I was a kid, they came up with something called, or running backs were like the only thing that you would play. Quarterbacks didn't score very many points because they didn't throw a lot back then. And there was only 2 wide receivers that were worth a darn. That was Jerry Rice and Tim Brown.
Yeah.
So they came up with something called point per reception. And, to make wide receivers somewhat relevant to, I guess, spice things up a little bit. If you fast forward to today's game, you have tight end premium and whatnot. You're trying to make different players more relevant. So it's just a different version of that. You're just trying to change things up and add more excitement to the game you already love.
Yeah, so that makes sense for me. So I do not personally play in any IDP leagues. What are some of like maybe the top 3 things that are similar between an IDP league and a standard offense only redraft league or dynasty league?
Like scoring wise?
Like scoring wise, strategy wise, like do you see enough similarities there that so someone like me who never played IDP, what we're trying to do is trying to make it a little more approachable for people like us in the audience that's
Yeah.
watching to go, hey, I've never played IDP. It seems like it's very different, but it really isn't, is it?
It's not. It's not as different as people like say. If they don't know it, they're a little afraid of it. But for 10 years or so, I've been turning people on to IDP.
Yeah.
I mean, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, they reach out to me to this day and thank me, for getting them involved in it. But it's no different from the offensive side. It's not like, oh, I've got to know so much more or anything like that. If you have, Isaiah Pacheco on your offense, Derrick Henry, something like that, and they're scoring a touchdown. I mean, that's pretty easy stuff to keep up with. Well, on the defensive side, if that Steeler fan has TJ Watt, or if you have Myles Garrett or something, and they get a sack, that's kind of like your defensive guy, quote unquote, scoring a touchdown. It's not much. Tackles are kind of like your yards. And that sack, or if it's a defensive back that gets an interception, or maybe a linebacker gets an interception, that's kind of like them scoring a touchdown. That's the, kind of the icing on top, if you will.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's the biggest I think the biggest thing the hurdle I have is that I feel like it's so many more players, right? In today's NFL, we have 2 running backs per team, right? 4 or 5 wide receivers, 2 tight ends. And I'm looking at it going, man, I got to look at every team's got 2 defensive ends, 3 or 4 linebackers, 3 or 4 corners or safeties that I might want to get. So it might be a little overwhelming for me. But I can understand that as the essence of watching a game and going, oh, that guy just got like, I'm a Bills fan, right? So, oh, Jordan Poyer, had a pick 6. That's a big play for the Bills, but now it's also a big play for my team. Where are some good resources for people if someone like, let's say a listener's watching, if you guys have questions about IDP and you're watching, hop over on the YouTube, drop them in the chat. We'll try to answer your questions as they come in. How are some ways that a person can get into, well, we might have lost Bob, but how can someone get into IDP? Where do you recommend they go to get some resources, whether that's advice, finding a league, tip sheets, that kind of stuff?
There's all kinds of different websites out there that, well, not a lot. I do work over at Dynasty Pros. I also do rankings at Fantasy Pros. So, those are 2 good resources to look at rankings. But the one thing with IDP that you have to really, really pay close attention to, or just pay attention to, is the scoring system.
Hmm.
The one knock that I have, me personally, against IDP leagues is there's really not a set scoring system. So it's really, really hard to when you're looking at ranking, if you're looking at full point PPR versus a standard league and in fantasy football, different guys are going to rank different places.
Yeah.
Most IDP leagues um, value tackles higher, more than anything. So, you're drafting those linebackers that are going to accumulate tackles. At the you mentioned the Kings Classic IDP draft that we just completed on Saturday. One of my targets, not jumping ahead, was at linebackers. I waited and waited and waited, let these guys kind of grab some linebackers. I racked up on, TJ Watt and Daniil Hunter, like these big sack, guys. And what I did is I took Robert Spillane of the Las Vegas Raiders. And personally, the reason why, I'm not going to spoil anything, but that offense is going to suck. That offense is going to be pretty rough. I mean,
Be
if
rough.
you've got, it doesn't matter if you got Gardner Minshew in there or
Aiden O'Connell, yeah.
McConnell, that offense is going to be a pretty tough one, which means that defense is really going to be on the field a lot more than it probably should be, which is good for, an IDP player. It's kind of like garbage time for that running back towards an end of a game. So, that, you just really have to pay attention to scoring. And then you kind of look up what resources you want to use. Now in the Kings Classic, Gary Davenport did something last year. It was the inaugural year, and he made the scoring so darn high for these defensive players that it made you consider taking, really in the first round, taking a defensive player over an offensive player. Which you really couldn't ever imagine. But this year, I ended up with the 11th pick out of 14 teams. And I'll just tell you, the highest scoring player over Christian McCaffrey, over Josh Allen, there was a defensive player that scored the most points, and that was TJ Watt. He was the highest scoring player in that league. And I was hoping to, if I maybe got a top 3 pick, I was hoping to be able to grab him. Nope. I ended up with the 11th pick, and I still got him with the 11th pick. So, it just really, really depends on that scoring system of how aggressive the scoring is with that. If it's more aggressive, then they're going to be more at a premium. And then roster construction. If you do have 3 defensive, a lot of them like to do 3 linemen, 3 linebackers, 3 DBs. That's going to make them more of they're going to be worth more. Some leagues will do, 2 at each position, so you're not going to have to be so aggressive with those. And some will do 1. Those beginner leagues might do 1 player, 1 player each, just to kind of see how it works out. That's what I did years and years ago. So there's nothing wrong with that. We do a lot of beginner leagues over at Dynasty Pros, and for people that's not ever played IDP, we'll set up 12-team leagues and invite people, anyone that wants to play. It's free leagues, but just inviting. You got nothing to lose. You get to try it out, check it out, see how you like it. Because we enjoy it. We want to introduce it to a lot more people with zero risk, zero money involved, whatever, and kind of take it from there.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest misconception I see amongst people with IDP is, right, for those beginner leagues, you only need to start 3 of them. It's not like you're starting 9 of them like you are on offense. So you don't need to roster, right? A standard redraft league, you're going to have 15 to 19 rounds of a draft. And so you have to know, if you're in a 10-team league, 190 players. But if you add an IDP to that, you're going to draft another 5-6 rounds, and you only need to know 50, 60 defensive players, which is pretty light compared to what you know on the offensive side. So I'm guessing if you're watching this and you play just offense only, you probably know 150 people easily, right? Like, I'm sure most people watching this can know at least on an offensive player. So you really only know half of that on defensive side, but you can get into bigger leagues. So for those who don't know, the Kings Classic is an event at the Fantasy Football Expo. It's an expert league. Last year they've always done offense only leagues, they do a snake and redraft. And last year, you guys got a IDP league. So Gary Davenport brought in you and 13 other expert IDP players to draft in this league. Now they do a Queens Classic as well, which has 14 of the women fantasy creators. And it's just a kind of a fun expert league to kind of pit, Bob, you're pitting your expertise knowledge against the other experts in the space, which is awesome. So you really get the thing. And we do a great job. You do a great job at Dynasty Pros, keeping those rankings up to date, putting out articles, talking about IDP, setting up those beginner leagues. So it's worth investigating if you are thinking about what else can I add. I agree with you that this innovation in this space with TPR and now tight end premium, people are trying to find a way of making things differently. And what I've always loved what you do is you've created a scoring system that basically says, let's make it competitive. Let's make a TJ Watt equal to a CD Lamb or Amos Like he should be up there. If he's the top scoring linebacker or defensive end, he should be up there with the top scoring running back and wide receiver. So how do you adjust it, right? Tackles. Or you'll have guys go after that guys. We don't even know if who's get 100 and some tackles, right? I remember, like Matt Milano for the Bills just racks up a ton of tackles, and he's not a household name, but he's a household IDP name. So that's where I think it's balancing out tackles and tackles for losses and sacks, interceptions, and fumble recoveries are big.
I mean, you gotta think of it, man. I mean, we're all fans of football. You're a Bills fan. I'm a Baltimore fan. It's not like when you're watching your game when my team's on defense, I'm going to get up and go make some food, or I'm going to go outside. No, you're watching your defense equally as much as your offense, and you're rooting for being a Bills fan. You're hoping Von Miller comes around and has a strip sack. I'm hoping one of my guys. Last year it was Jadeveon Clowney. It's watching Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen last year. Kyle Hamilton. You're watching your defensive players. I mean, you get equally as excited if your team gets a sack or if they get a fumble or an interception or whatever. You're equally as excited. Why not, bring that aspect into fantasy football, and really that way it's like, I mean, nothing was cooler for me when you brought up Ed Reed and Ray Lewis. I'm playing in fantasy football leagues, and my favorite player of all time, Ray Lewis, I've got him on my fantasy team, and I wished I could have been that way when I was a kid, thought of it. And, people could have had Lawrence Taylor or, Warren Sapp or something like that on their team,
Bruce Smith, Reggie White, those guys. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just you're rooting for your defense. You're watching it. You're just as equally invested in that. Why not bring, just sprinkle that into your fantasy league and see what you think,
Yeah, and if you want, we talked about fandom. I talked about fandom last week with Coop and ways of showing your fandom and appropriately showing your fandom. And we've said pick up your team defense, but if you're playing an IDP, you could just pick up a defensive player. So as a Bills fan, like if I don't, Josh Allen's a first round pick, James Cook is a second or third round pick, Holman, Kincaid's probably a third round pick in tight end premium. So it's like, I'm not gonna be able to get all those guys. Maybe I can get Matt Milano or Von Miller late and still show my fandom by having defensive players. So Bob, if people are playing IDP this year, who are 3 IDP sleepers that you can throw out there for people that maybe they're like, yeah, I'm in a league, or I'm trying to get in a league, or I'm thinking about getting a league. Who are 3 IDP sleepers for people this year?
Oh, wow. God. Oh,
we always want to give people some actionable advice here, even though we're talking about topics. We want to give them some players. Yep.
Well, Trenton Simpson of the Baltimore Ravens, not trying to be a homer, but they did lose Patrick Queen this year to the Steelers of all friggin' places. But, it's a name, when it's so hard in today's game to actually come up with the name sleeper. I mean, everybody really does research and knows all these players. So, Trenton Simpson's going to step into that position, and he's a lesser known linebacker. But if he can put up, 75% of the numbers that Patrick Queen did, that'll be phenomenal. That'll be fantastic. Jeremiah Trotter Jr. of the Eagles has a legitimate chance of playing as a rookie and stepping in there. I don't know if he starts week 1, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's in there by week 3, week 4. That's a little bit deeper of a sleeper. That's a little bit more of a risky move depending on your roster construction. If you have the bench space, he's a stash. Well, I don't know if I'd call him a sleeper, but more of a stash.
Stash.
Lastly, Here's a thing in IDP leagues that I implement that Gary Davenport and I kind of, have a little bit of difference on. But, I think in fantasy football leagues, you should have return yards, punt returns,
Okay.
kick returns. You don't have to get crazy with it, but I really, really love in offensive leagues where you could have had that Devin Duvernay or
Yeah.
some of those players that just are more of the returner. In a deeper league, you can actually pick up that guy and he might actually score you a few points.
Yeah.
I mean, look at what they did with Scott Fishbowl this year. So,
Yeah.
In IDP leagues, cornerbacks are probably the least important position because they don't get a lot of touches. They don't get a lot of tackles. So they don't score very, very many points unless they get a pick. They get an interception. So, years ago, I added, return yards in those IDP leagues, and it actually made some of those cornerbacks useful. I mean, these guys are returning kicks, returning punts, racking up some yards, and every once in a while, one of them might break one off for a touchdown. So it really, really adds just a little bit more, just like what they're doing with the Scott Fishbowl and a lot of fantasy football leagues. You're gonna have that in your IDP leagues. So a name, talking about that, like 2 years ago in a lot of our IDP leagues, believe it or not, the number one scoring defensive back altogether, safeties, cornerbacks included, was Marcus Jones of the New England Patriots because he was the kickoff returner, the punt returner. Actually, they actually put him in a few offensive plays. He caught a touchdown, ran a few back, had a pick six. Man, it was a great season for him. So, piggybacking off of that, Keyshawn Nixon, a cornerback for the Green Bay Packers. He's an elite level returner that is cornerback eligible because some of these IDP leagues, when they get a little deeper, you may have to start an actual cornerback and you just can't play safeties. So regardless, if you have return yards in your league, then Keyshawn Nixon is definitely a name to go and grab. He's not a high scoring defensive back, but if you've got those returns, he can be a little bit of a cheat code.
That's good. So you said Trenton Simpson, Jeremiah Trotter, and Keyshawn Nixon are people to pick up. I want to ask you a few more questions because you brought this up a couple times, roster construction. So let's say I'm in an IDP. So in my offensive leagues, I know if it's a 1 QB, I'm going to take two. If I need to start 2 running backs, I might have 6 and maybe 7 wide receivers and 2 tight ends. Let's say you're in a league that requires you to start 1 defensive lineman, 1 linebacker, 1 secondary guy. Are you going 2 at each position? Or are you loading up maybe 3 linebackers and, obviously taking away maybe from wide receiver? What are you looking at with roster construction? Like, how do you like to divvy up? How much depth do you want to have on your team for those defensive players?
And you said you'd be starting 1 lineman, 1 linebacker, 1 DB?
Yes.
Oh, gosh. Well, you could really, really wait. You're probably not going to, think about having only to start 1 running back or 1 wide receiver. I mean, it just in a 1 quarterback league. I mean, there's a lot of pretty good quarterbacks that are on a waiver wire all year round. So you can view it that way.
Treat it like a onesie position, like a quarterback or tight end.
You could literally wait. You could almost draft a defensive player like a kicker. And if you have a 10-team league, especially if it's a 12-team league too, if you go a little, bigger than that, you might want to pay a little closer attention. But if you're doing 1 of each, you don't have to make it a priority unless you're a Steeler fan and you just love TJ Watt, and then you might want to go and grab your guy just because it just makes your team that much more fun. You've got your dude. I don't like the Steelers, but I drafted, TJ Watt, with my number 1 pick because I'm trying to win that league. I was real close to winning it last year, but Leo McNeely, Master IDP over on X, he won the league. He I think he went, like 15, 16 and 1 or something. He lost 1 game all year and it was to this guy.
That's right.
So we were real close to playing in the championship game, but I had a defensive player go down that got me 0 points, a linebacker on top of it all. So they rack up points, and I lost by 2 points to Gary Davenport because my linebacker, Jordan Brooks, at the time with the Seattle Seahawks, went down. So that one kind of cost me a championship run, a rematch, So yeah, it just depends on the more requirements, the more starters you have, the more of a priority it's going to be as far as picking up players. If it's one of each, man, you can wait. Maybe let some of those other. I've seen it in some of those starter leagues that we've done, where a lot of those people will go and they will grab IDPs early, even if it's just one. That's a mistake, because other guys, if they're smart, they're going to grab more offensive players. You can wait quite a long time, if it's just one of each.
Yeah, so that's a great plug for us at Dynasty Pros. You can hit us up on Dynasty Pros on Twitter, which is scrolling at the bottom at Dynasty Pros FF. Hit up Bob or hit up me if you're interested in getting an IDP league. Maybe we can get a bunch of people, enough people to start another league this year. I think the other question people have that don't play IDP is valuing a TJ Watt compared to a Christian McCaffrey. I can look at trade calculators most places, right? I can go on and go, I kind of have my rankings and go, okay, this guy scored missing points. Where can I find those kind of like comparisons of, is a Roquan Smith, what's he worth in a trade? Like, and someone goes, hey, I want to trade you a defensive guy for an offensive guy, and I go, I don't. If it's new to me, how do I figure that out? How do I navigate that?
That's a very, very good question. It's a very loaded question, because it all depends on the scoring system, how much defensive players score. The more they score, the more they're going to be worth.
Yeah.
Most IDP leagues, there's these IDP 1, 2, 3 scoring system, which a lot of people have used for years. To me, I'm not knocking it by any means, but it's just a little too bland, a little too vanilla for me. They don't score very many points, so it just doesn't do much for me. For years and years and years playing in these IDP leagues, a good friend of mine that's been with me day one, we would tweak our scoring every year. There was a couple of times where our defensive players, in my opinion, didn't really score enough and really didn't have enough of an impact on my weekly matchup. So then I would tweak it, the next year, and then I was like, whoa, I actually put a little too much heat on that. So it was a little too much. So over the last 14 years, I think I've come up with a very, very good scoring system that we rolled out probably about 5 years ago. And it's on our website over at dynastyprosfootball.com. And we do have a trade calculator there that's free right now. It usually requires a membership, but for the time being, over the next month or so, it's going to be completely free. And we have IDPs in there. So and it's based, their values are based off of our scoring system, which you can see on the website as well. I have it listed, a little chart that shows the scoring system, especially with our IDP rankings. So yeah, you can plug in, if, like you said, Christian McCaffrey, if you're in our scoring system, TJ Watt's not enough to get McCaffrey. Yeah. But what it'll do, kind of like with Keep Trade Cut, is it'll give you a recommendation of maybe what else you might need to add, how many more trade points, I guess you could say, you would need to add to even up that deal. And we actually have Devy players and Devy IDPs as well as part of that calculator. It's really one of the only calculators out there that has all of that. I don't think any calculator out there has offensive players that includes IDPs, that includes Devys, and includes Devy IDPs. There's not one out there except for ours. So yeah, you can plug a lot of stuff in there, but it really all depends on that scoring system and how aggressive the defensive players score. If they score very, very well, then they're absolutely worth a lot more than, I guess what some people would think.
And I think that's the way it should be, right? We talk, tight end premium has made the mainstream now, where they're trying to balance out tight ends with running backs. So PPR came in to balance out wide receivers to running backs. Quarterbacks were scoring much. They turned quarterbacks down to 4 points per pass touchdown and kind of even them out. Now it's tight end premium to get so wide receiver, running back, tight end, quarterback are all scoring about the same. I think it should be the same for IDP. Your Micah Parsons, your TJ Watts, your Aaron Donald when he was playing, like they should be up there in that same stratosphere as those guys. So that's the way IDP should be. So again, if you are looking for IDP help, hit us up on Twitter, hit me or Bob or the Dynasty Pros account. We'd love to help you out. We're here to answer your questions. You can check out our trade calculator. Right, you're right. It has offensive players, defensive players, Devy players, which we haven't done Devy show yet, but Devy is college players, and college IDP players. So if you're a sicko who likes that kind of stuff, I do not. But if you're fully into it, we have one of the trade calculators that has, college IDP players in there, which is, I think it's the first one on the market, and we've had it out for a while now. So hit us up on Twitter. If you guys have questions about IDP, again, ask us. We'd love to help you guys out. If you want to try IDP, hit us up. Maybe we can get enough 10 people to join a league. I think a couple times you had joined a league just to kind of be like a mentor to people, and we got some other people on staff who do IDP. Obviously, I won't be able to help you, but I can at least point you to the right people because I know nothing about IDP. So that's our IDP. So, Bob, as we wrap up the show, I want to do a rank them for you. So I want you to rank these Ravens players one through 4. So first I'm going to start with all time. You got Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, Terrell Suggs, and Marshall Yanda. How would you rank them 1 through 4?
Ooh, I would. It would be in that order, exactly that order.
Exactly that order. Okay, so you got Ray Lewis first, Ed Reed 2, Suggs 3, and Yanda 4. All right, let's do current Ravens players. How are you ranking them?
Oh boy,
Mark Andrews, Lamar Jackson, Justin Tucker, and Zay Flowers.
This might be a little crazy, but I'm going to go number 1's going to be Justin Tucker. That's the best kicker of all time. He's the GOAT, and we're watching him play right now. So
yeah.
It's kind of he should be on the all-time list over Marshall Yanda, in my opinion. And he would probably be over Terrell Suggs. It would be.
I agree.
Anyway, so yeah, he's number 1. Lamar's number 2. Mark Andrews is a close 3rd, and then Zay Flowers. Unfortunately, has to be the 4th guy on this list. But man, I love that little guy.
But he is such a character. Meeting him at the combine in the draft, he is just such a fun guy. He's got just biggest smile in the world. I agree. I think Flowers has potential to pass Mark Andrews if he continues on this trajectory right now. I agree with you. I think Justin Tucker is extremely underrated as a current player, but also in the all-time conversation, right? We talk about Vinatieri, and that's the GOAT of kickers. I think Justin Tucker is the best kicker that's ever played, personally. So I think he is underrated. I think he should be 1. Lamar obviously has won an MVP, right? So he's up there. He's won 2 MVPs. So there you go. So I think he deserves to be 2. I wish there was more awards for kickers, to be honest with you. Like, there's not really an award for a kicker. I mean, we have Offensive Player of the Year, we have Defensive Player of the Year, we have MVP, we have Rookie of the Year. I wish there was like Kicker of the Year or something like that for those guys out there. I agree with you. I think, Andrews is a close 3rd behind Lamar, and then Zay Flowers is 4, only because he's got 1 year, but I think he's got some more coming up. So, Bob, as we wrap this up, tell everybody once again where they can find you, where they can, contact you if they have questions about IDP, so they can come and reach out and maybe join some IDP leagues with you.
Absolutely. Like I said, you can follow me on Twitter at Dynasty Bob FF. You can always reach out to me there. Just shoot me a DM, and if you're interested in joining some of those IDP starter leagues, man, we're all for it. The one requirement we have is you cannot have played in any IDP league. You have to be a brand new person. You have no experience at all. Last year we had a guy that we said that, and then he was in the league and we were doing the draft, and he started talking all this smack during the draft. And it was very, very apparent that he had played in IDP leagues. Yeah. So let's just say he was no longer in the league after that. So yeah, that's the thing. We want everyone to be on an even playing field. Everybody's brand new to it. And that's the one requirement.
Yeah, and I think that's part of this podcast's mission is to bridge that gap, make things more approachable. And I like that you've always done that, is making IDP approachable for new people. So they're not getting in a league with sharks. They're getting in with people that are all on the same playing field, same level of experience, but you guys are there to help out and answer questions and build that team and introduce people to something different. And I think there's some people that play it and love it. And there's some people that just go, maybe it's not for me. That's what it's all about. Is you don't know until
Yeah.
you try. And hopefully we've answered a lot of the questions that you guys have on tonight's show, Bridge the Gap. Bob, thank you so much for coming on. It's always a pleasure talking to you. You know, we talk on the phone all the time, but it's great to have you on the podcast. If you guys are watching this, hit that like and subscribe on the Bridge the Gap channel or the Dynasty Pros channel. We appreciate your support, and we will see you next week as we bridge the gap.
Thanks for tuning in to Bridge the Gap.